All right. Sounds good. Well, my name is Ed Grindle. I work for the camera company. I'm kind of coordinating a lot of these classes. But today we're pleased to have Tamron come and talk to us about the history of Tamron, which actually, even though I've been working with Tamron for all these years, I'm kind of excited to hear this presentation because they go back a while, just as I do in photography. So, Steve, I'll let you introduce our co-host and we'll go from there.
Hi, everybody. My name's Steve Ostrander. I'm the sales rep for the camera company. And I want to welcome everybody. And also, I'll let you know about some specials we have going on right now. There's rebates going on that are good through the first, through the 3rd of July, I believe. They vary from $50 to $200 depending on the lens. And Ed and the team at Camera Company would have the details on those. And there are some special rebates on some other lenses. Besides the instant savings, there's circular polarizer promotion where buy a lens, get a free circular polarizer, and that's up to a $200 value also. So some great deals going on right now. We do have, today actually is the launch day for one of our new lenses. So we're really excited about that. We have the new 28 to 200, the first time ever that there's an all-in-one zoom lens that starts at 2.8. So we have a 28 to 200, 2.8 to 5.6 for the Sony E-mount full frame. And that's rolling out today at 729. So a camera company might have some stock. They were shipped some. I don't know if they're gone yet, but hopefully there are more on the way. But that's very exciting. And then, of course, we have some other new lenses that were introduced recently, like the 70 to 180 Sony E-mount f2.8. So a lot of stuff going on at Tamron. So there's a lot of history behind Tamron, and Jared's going to get into that because he's been with the company since day one. 1950, so he looks a lot younger than he actually is.
His grades are coming in finally. Take
it away, Jared.
Wow. Well, thank you, Steve. It's always good to see you. Thank you, Camera Company, for having me. And hopefully we can have a really good discussion about a little bit of history, maybe some of the things we've done, maybe some of the ways we're going. In the process of this, I might have to lean on Steve. He knows a little bit too. But if you can think of a product that maybe at the end you don't see that really influenced you or something that you liked, throw it in the comments so maybe I can add it to the program or learn more about that specific product, because I'll be very honest with you, I think I'm the only person in the company who really wanted to create a program like this. Steve's actually working in the converse that I'm the newest field employee to Tamron, and so this has helped me learn a lot, and I can tell you I had to scour some parts of the internet to find some information. We didn't have as much out there as I thought. So between different company outlets, whether it's Tamron Japan, Tamron USA, parts of Europe, I've been able to coalesce some of this data for you. And so let's dive in real quick and take a look. Just need to share my screen real quick and we'll go from there. So hopefully everybody should see that. Make one more adjustment on my screen. Oops, just kidding. Let's go back where I lose my mouse pointer every time I do this, folks. So maybe I won't be able to. So thank you for joining us. As I said, Jared Powers, History of Tamron. So let's start out. Tamron is not that different than most all Japanese companies, okay? Japanese companies like to have this, a sense of understanding. Why are we doing what we're doing? A purpose that all companies, all employees of a company can relate to. I know if you were to say, go to Canon's headquarters, right out front, there's a gigantic granite stone that has theirs, which is not Monozukuri. However, Monozukuri is something that I do believe Nikon, Canon, all Japanese companies actually adhere to because they're manufacturers. And as you see at the bottom, this is our 70th anniversary. So that's a pretty big deal for us. Last year, my first year with Tamron was kind of a big deal too. That was our 40th year of SP lens production. So now we have moved on to 70 years and 41 years respectively. When we look back, here are some of the older, not the oldest. It was very, very difficult to try and find some of the 1950s, 60s. It wasn't until the mid 70s where information started becoming much more readily available. So as you see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's our 60th anniversary. I happened to see the similar logo, I want to say it was the 30th or the 40th, just earlier today on something I was doing, and I was kind of shocked to see how similar some of the logos are. We haven't necessarily changed a ton over time. We want you to be able to recognize us, that Tamron blue, whether it's on white or black or vice versa. So these are just some of the logos you might have seen in the last recent amount of time with us. So here are some of the early days. And to tell you, so right now, because it's our 70th year, we've got a promotion going on with a website that we've created that just explains some of our history. Right now, the first 2 of 5 parts of that website is now up and functional, and you can see certain information like this. However, I'm going to show you some older brochures where this information was in there too. The gentleman on the left, we are going to discuss later on today. Oye Tomura is actually, Mr. Tomura is where we got the name Tamron from. I believe, as best I can tell, that this was a kind of paying homage to him in his excellence of optical quality that he searched out for in the direction that he pushed the company into. So he's a big name for us when we look back on our history. Here's just some example photos of what the factories looked like and what people may have been doing back in the 60s when they were working as an optical manufacturer. I know in this bottom left-hand corner, if your screens are, the brightness on your screens are up enough, you'll notice we've got a lot of long lenses sitting across the table there, the very, very bottom. When Tamron started, and our first lens, we were able to begin manufacturing our first lens, we could only produce about 300 a month. So it's not uncommon to see so few lenses like that sitting around. Nowadays, we expect a higher level of production, which doesn't always have a human element. So a lot more lenses can be churned out. Whereas at this time, you know, the art of polishing glass was something that you worked many, many years for. It was not something that you simply learned overnight. To the point that there are still master apprentices that we use that have been with us for a long, long time in Japan, and they make just the glass molds that we use to test against, so that we know our lenses actually reach a certain standard that we are shooting for. So as we go through 1950, if you see something in blue, I know there's going to be a lot of text here. I promise that when I'm done with all that text, I am going to show you photos, something a little more exciting than words. But if you see it in blue, it's maybe a high point for us, or you know, what we think. We started in 1950 with 13 staff. In 1957, it was that first interchangeable system with a T-mount, and I'm going to show you aspects of that, which parlayed into the Adaptall 2 system, and before that even the Adaptomatic, that world's first mass-produced zoom lens. Now, we heard Steve mention in the beginning, you know, we are quite proud of a world's first super zoom that begins at f2.8, or all-in-one zoom. So we did that one in 1961 at f6.3. That's pretty ugly by today's standards, but at that time, that was what we were able to mass produce and get out at a price point that many people could afford. So it's not always that you can't, it's sometimes about affordability when we are bringing our products to market. 1970 was when we paid our homage to Mr. Tamura by changing our name from what was the Taisei Optical Company into Tamron as we know it today. And then in 1979, that was the beginning of SP, as I mentioned earlier, super performance. If anyone is unclear what that is, an easy way to think about SP is it is a Canon L series, a Nikon Nikkor, or a Sony G Master equivalent for us. It is always going to be our best optical formula. It will be our best weather sealing. It'll be your all-around workhorse, and that is because that is what we've designed it from the ground up to do. So as we skip along here, all the way until 1992, if you'll notice, that's actually what we've been talking about. We launched the autofocus 28 to 200 millimeter, 3.8 to 5.6, which at the time was the world's smallest and lightest zoom lens for SLRs. So this new lens that we're all super proud about has actually been in our DNA for quite some time. We weren't always able to get it down to 2.8 or have it as small and lightweight as we do now, because it is extraordinarily small and lightweight. But it took us years to get to this point to be able to bring this to market the way we do. And we did have an interesting moment in the 90s too, where some of you may remember Bronica. If anyone out there shot Bronica or something equivalent, we ended up acquiring that company as it was, medium format wasn't, I guess it was heading out the door a little bit. I was not a medium format shooter at that time. I didn't begin until the early 2000s. And I was a little late to the game because I really did enjoy medium format, 645 Mamiyas and things like that. But overall, the 90s, as you will see, even a little bit from now, I don't know why it was hard to find information. Maybe there wasn't a lot going on. We as a company might have pulled back a little bit like a lot of manufacturers did when the world began to digitize itself, 1995 and onwards. It didn't matter what industry you were in, we all began to question how we could electrify or digitize, and is it going to make our life easier? Are we going to be able to do this, etc.? So that could be one of the reasons that the 90s were a little strange when it came to finding data such as this. So 2016 and 2017, the reason I point these out is because we are a very large company, and we don't always talk about the products that we make because we don't have a reason to. If you bought a point and shoot, you might very well be shooting a Tamron lens and not know it, despite the logo that may be on the outside of that camera. So in Japan, we do manufacture different little modules that will control cameras. It might be a backup camera for your car. It might be, as you see, the drone cameras, or compact lens modules. It could be CCTV modules. Okay, there's a bunch of different ways where the ability to have small, lightweight lenses that are interconnected and just essentially plug and play. We really discovered that there was a market for that and began to fill it a little before this time. As best I can tell, maybe 2005-ish or after. So that is what we've seen up to 2017 from Tamron, along with a lot of offices that have opened around the world. You can buy a Tamron lens on 6 of the 7 continents, and we do manufacture on two of the continents, but we're represented worldwide very, very easily. So there's our first product, standalone product, a 7x35 binocular. I think a lot of people might think that we always started out in camera lenses, and we didn't. That wasn't how we got started. So wide vision binoculars is what we brought to the market in 1953. It wasn't actually until 1957 we actually were able to bring out this model number 280 at roughly what I was saying was 300 lenses per month, which is pretty small quantity wise. So from there, while we were still kind of mass producing lenses, we had a brilliant idea for the time, which was the T-mount. And it allowed you to interchange lenses in a somewhat of a more universal mount for the time. Back in this time, most all camera lenses were screw or bayonet, may have been only one. And so how did you get back and forth, etc.? And so Tamron, because we did not make cameras, it was easy for us to do this. And we had decided in the beginning, we were not going to make a camera. We only wanted to make optics for cameras. So here's kind of an example of the mounts and how we handled them. Across this bottom left, these are all the different cameras where the mount would have teed up for. And then you, as the user, would have a choice of I mean, depending on how many you owned or you got in the set, you know, 3, 5, 8, I believe up to 8 different models of lens that you could adapt to whatever camera you had. So this is the system brochure from 1966. Here is another one, and you can tell by the sociopathic glaze across that lady's eyes that you really need that set of lenses. she doesn't, she looks really uncomfortable holding that box. And I'm not sure why. But this again will show you too in the bottom graphic on the right hand side, how it says around that lens Auto Tamron, and it's a mount for Minolta, for Miranda, for Nikon, for Canon, Pentax, and for Konica. This was even before Konica and Minolta merged into Konica Minolta. So again, just another little brochure that kind of explains our servicing, our repairs, but also gives you a glance at that Adaptomatic system. There's another super popular, again, known as the original Adaptall lens. This is the 85 to 210 f4.5. And so here in the mid 70s, we're beginning to see the lowering of that initial f-stop, you know, from 6.3 down to 5.6 down to 4.5. We're able to give long lenses, longer zooms, and a smaller form factor with a better f-stop for shooters out there. The Adaptall 2 80 to 210 lens, another very popular one in the early 80s. And this is when we're beginning to get into what is going to be the birth of autofocus, us putting, or the industry as a whole going from manual to autofocus lenses. This would have, as you see, is matched to an Olympus versus another mount that you might have tried to use at the time. Rest in peace, Olympus, as we've just learned. They are exiting the camera business as of yesterday. And we will see if the Japanese investment company who bought them is going to do anything interesting with them. We all hold hope. We will wait and see. So it's 81. So here's another compatibility chart for the mid 1980s. And I enjoy this one a lot because I don't know how many times I've been anywhere in the world in a camera store looking through a used cabinet. And that's what we always did. You looked at the top of the mirror box for, did it say Asahi, right? Or, you know, is it the Rolleiflex name? Whichever we were partial to, because that's what our family shot, or that's what we grew up shooting. So this graphic is very interesting to me, along with, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, it says wide field teleview adapter. And Steve might be able to correct me if he has seen this product. I'm not sure if he has. But by reading it, what I understand is this used to essentially turn your lenses into a telescope if you wanted them to. It was, you know, like just looking like this, which is pretty crazy. Manufacturers don't give us fun toys like that anymore. We don't get opportunities to turn our lens into anything other than what goes on the face of our camera. So that was amazing. You look at that lens, that's an old mirrored lens on the front. I believe the graphic does say it is a Tamron SP 500 F8 is what that is. So from there, we still kept manufacturing binoculars, spotting scopes, things of that nature for people who were still looking for optics, just not involved in a professional or amateur photography realm. This catalog from roughly 1982 showed me a ton of different things that we did and still do. Now, in the industry today, we don't have the same form factors as you see on this left-hand side, this orange camera that's that large. You know, even if you took, I mean, think of the size of a Z7 or a Canon R, which is going to shoot 4K. That's our cameras are much smaller for what they can do. So our digital lenses within the industry still have somewhat stayed that same size, unless we begin to talk about what I mentioned at the end of all the text, which was CCTV modules that are really small. Okay, so we do not make this style of CCTV mount anymore, where you have a bayonet that goes into a camera such as this. And then on the right-hand side, another product that most people wouldn't talk about either was projection lenses for whatever kind of projector you might have had at the day. A lot of us were shooting transparency still. It was an easier way to show, and it was a family event for us to show and discuss our vacations and put them on the wall when our friends would come visit, things of that nature. I say that as a person who has at least 2 square foot worth of family slides that I have to convert, and I keep forgetting that they're in the closet to do. So I need to get to that. So again, 90s were slow, and then in the 2000s, advertising on a whole, you know, we all got digitized. You can see the lens has changed now. We have these gold rings, which went to silver rings too at certain points. You see rubber gasketing on the outside of the lenses, more so now in the 90s and 2000s, as compared to having older lenses that had etched marks on metal rings and metal barrels. Tamron at the same time became an industry leader in injection molding plastics, as well as injection molded glass and things of that nature. So those two things have helped us over time keep our prices down, and allowed us to change how we made lenses, how sturdy they could be, weather sealed, things of that nature. When we began to use more modern products to build our lenses with. And on to our newest. We've gone back to a few products that we still saw in those earlier catalogs. If you look at the bottom, we got teleconverters, which we still make. Right now, your teleconverters will match up with 4 of your current SP or G2 lenses. Then you see the mount hoods, which should you want one, ours, unlike a lot of people out there, have Arca Swiss built into them. So we can mount directly onto a tripod. Most all of our lenses that need one ship with one. I can think the 70-210 doesn't, but you can pick one up from us should you want to. But the most important thing on here is the huge advancement that we have made in giving you, the consumer, the ability to adjust your lenses digitally. This is what we call the tap-in console. I hope you guys already have it. If you don't, it's super simple. You lock it on the back mount, open up your computer, turn on your free software that comes from us, and then you can adjust some, depending on the lens, focus speeds, front or back focus issues that you may think you have, certain things like that. So this kind of functionality is something we've had to come up with. We love to make lenses, but we don't always know who's going to do what with them. Part of my job is I get to meet photographers all over the country, and I still on a, it used to be quarterly, but now half yearly basis, I will still meet a photographer who does something with our gear that I'd never thought of. I don't, there's so much in this world you can photograph. So for us to be able to give customization so that you can use our gear in your workflow the way you want to, has kind of been priority for us. And it is for a lot of people in the industry these days, or at least it needs to be. So that is where we've come to at this point of 2020. A couple of things that you may not know, though, is Sony does have a 12% stake in us, and that's how we have good communication with our lenses, talking back and forth to the camera and employing Sony features inside of them. I know Steven and I will test it. There's products we don't know about. We can't talk about them because they go unnoticed. They fly under their government radar. We got an email a month into the pandemic that was basically a silent thank you that said, hey, the government says thank you. We can't tell you what, but we've really been helpful. and that was cool and awesome. I don't know what it was, but I'm glad that we as a company were able to do our part. But we do make quite a few optical components, as you see there, that you may not have known, whether it is camcorder or cell phone lenses, backup cameras for cars, as I mentioned, or commercial industrial products. And this does go into that projection, that CCTV, but also high precision parts, whether it's the injection molded glass or the plastic. We don't just make them for ourselves. We are a manufacturer of them for the world. So our devices are out there many times with and without our name on it. And with that, that's what I know so far. I thought I heard a ding as though there might be a question or two. So I'm going to skip out of my program. Before I do, I just want to say thank you for your time and attention. I'm sorry that we all have to meet like this. I wish we could do it in person and maybe have some of these fun things to play with. But with that, I will take off my my screen share real quick, folks, and I will answer any questions you might have had. Nothing. Nobody. Anybody.
Okay, I have a question that probably is not a surprise from a Canon user.
Sure.
Now I
I can,
understand. Now,
I know what's coming.
yeah, Steve, would you like to ask my question for me?
No, Jared's highly trained at this. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. Yeah, go for it.
Perhaps the Sony ownership explains this, but Canon makes mirrorless cameras as well.
Yes, they did.
And unless I've missed something, I haven't seen any Tamron lenses for those cameras. Am I wrong?
You're correct, sort of.
And that's why I was like,
So
Not with adapters. Not with adapters.
oh, okay.
at this point, there are no Tamron branded crop sensor, like M-mount lenses, where we do not manufacture Tamron branded M-mount lenses. And when it comes to R-mount and R and Z, for me, kind of go in that same boat. That is one of my most popular questions in the last year. Anytime somebody sees me out in public is, when are you making them? And a lot of people think that we're going to make them first. And I'm sure my friends at maybe Sigma, they're running into the same issue. Somebody's coming up to their desk saying, hey, you're making these? And we're not. There is a licensing and discussion that is way above Steve and mine's head. We do believe that we will be manufacturing them, but how soon and at what point, I don't really have any hard answer for you on that,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
they don't allow us to speculate on it either. So
Yeah.
So all we need to do is buy a 12% stake, and we can get the lenses made, right?
But you have to understand.
Right.
One of the things to understand about that relationship with Sony is it goes back into some of this history we were talking about. And I'll give you an example of this. This is widely known information. I'm not giving anything away here. So how did that relationship with Sony actually start? Remember the Sony camcorders of the day that mounted on your shoulder? You know, before everything got really small. So how did Sony make how did they make their cameras into handy cams? They did it by injection molding, which is a process that they really mastered to be able to get that big thing off your shoulder and be able to hold it in your hand. And they sold tonnage of those handy cams. And they did it under not only Sony's name, but there were several other Ricoh, and there were other ones that were being made. It's an OEM process.
All debatable.
So it's just like refrigerators or whatever. You got 3 or 4 companies making 50 different names. So they were big into that. And as we know, and as the history shows, Tamron's made camcorder lenses for many years. So they had that expertise. What they needed to do is make camera lenses smaller and lighter weight. That was always the goal. So there has been long this working relationship with Sony. They needed glass. We needed technology for injection molding. So that's something that came together. And there's a product that kind of demonstrates that very in the history that probably most people don't know about. But they actually made a product called the PhotoVix. Did you see that in your
No, you've taught me 2 things. I'm actually going to get a pad real quick and write that down.
So there's a PhotoVix. Basically, it was a copy stand, and it was a video camera that was mounted. It was all one piece, and it had a light box underneath. And so the camera part of it was on top, and then the light box was underneath. And basically, it was a slide copier or a negative copier. All right. So that had to have a video camera in it, but it was a Tamron product. So again, relationship between a camera manufacturer and a lens company came up with a product that was sold under the Tamron name of PhotoVix. So, when you look at how technology moves forward, it's those partnerships, relationships, deals, agreements that are done. Tamron is the largest OEM manufacturer in the world of optics. So they work with a lot of companies that you know very, very well, and under different names, as that government thing would talk about that they couldn't really talk about. So when we go to meetings and we talk about the overall business of Tamron, there are certain things that they can't share. It's just well known that we're an OEM manufacturer and we work with a lot of companies, and that's why we're the largest. But also being the largest, we're also the most awarded lens manufacturer. Won more awards than like everybody else. And a lot of that is for moving the technology forward. Jared mentioned the thing about, some of the optics, the hybrid aspheric lens elements and those types of things. Leica with their glass and everything that was going on with that is spherical lens elements. As we know, a lens element is spherical. So typically it's spherical. So if you continued the curve all the way around, it would just be a sphere. An aspherical or aspherical lens element has a curve to it. So that has to be grinded in the glass. And Leica was very good at doing that, but they would grind it. It was a process of grinding the glass. So Tamron developed a hybrid aspherical lens element where it was molded. So they could actually mold something into a shape, which was a lot lighter, a lot less expensive to manufacture. And that's technology that helped make lenses smaller and lighter weight. You could do, instead of using 3 or 4 elements, you could do the same thing in one element. Bending the light a certain way so that it came straight through, and all the things that light needs to do. Because you put a piece of glass down, it does something really well, but it also does something very bad that the next piece of glass needs to correct, and so on and so forth. So they advance that technology. It's just one example. Another example is image stabilization. Canon invented, as Jared knows, Canon invented image stabilization in photo optics. And they had their initial ones were horizontal, vertical. You had a switch on the lens. You could switch back and forth. Tamron looked at that and they said, well, that's a good idea, but if we use three motors in there, 3 coils, we could do it in a triangulation system, and that way you wouldn't have to switch it, and no matter what direction you were moving, it would stabilize. And Tamron invented that technology and put it into things. So that was another advancement of technology. So when you look at these advances in technology in the optics business, a lot of it is Tamron related. And if you look at the history of the awards that Tamron has won over the years, it's amazing. Every time we come out with a lens, there's a bunch of new, we're waiting for the awards on the new 28 to 200. We know there's going to be some. It's just a question of what they are and who they appeal to. And so there's a lot of history in a lot of things. So when you ask questions about, when is Tamron going to have, our lenses, we get the question about Nikon Z lenses and stuff like that. We don't know, but there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And one of the things that, because we also get questions about things like, when are we going to have them in Fuji mount or Olympus mount or those types of things. And you have to also remember that they've got their factories going 24/7 around the world to keep up with demand and the OEM stuff and everything they're doing. The demand has to be at a certain level for them to develop something new. So we didn't initially see them in Sony E-mount, even though we had the relationship with Sony. We didn't see it in Sony E-mount for a few years until Sony got to the point where it's like, okay, the demand is so high now that we have to come out with something. But we're not going to come out with 28 different lenses, focal lengths, when we're not going to take existing lenses and just change the mount. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to do it right. And we're going to make it something that people are going to really want. There were already expensive lenses and already heavy lenses that work really well on there made by Sony. So why do the same thing that they're doing? Why not come out with something smaller, lighter, less expensive, and back it up with technology and design that is award-winning? You know, you talk to anybody that shoots with that stuff, they're going like, man, this thing is fast, it's sharp, it's a native lens built specifically for that system. So the expectation for us in the field is that when Tamron does decide to do it, it's going to be really good, and you're really going to want it, you know, because we know that there's the demand out there, and the sales are getting to that point. But now with what's happened in the last, 6 months or whatever, last few months, it's how does that change things? We have no idea. Does that delay it even longer? Does it give them an opportunity to make more, to make more advancements because they had time on their hands? I have no way of knowing. It'll be really interesting to find out, though.
Thank you. Because go ahead. Sorry, sir. Go ahead.
I just want to ask, I know you can't be specific, but what are the general directions in the next couple of years, the kinds of things we might see in the future? More zooms, more macros, there are other things. I mean, what kind of, where might you guys be going in the next couple of years?
So George, we've been focused on our FE mount here for a little bit. And I know, we've been asked for feedback from people across the country, all of our sales reps, all of our tech reps. What do we want to do with that? What are people asking us for? So I think when we talk about FE glass, there is an expectation or a hope of something on the a wide zoom. And there's a lot of love for that 150 to 600. So everybody wants that in their mount. Is that going to come down the pipeline? We're not sure, but I mean, that's two ways where I could kind of clearly look. I would also like to think as a sort of a business person, the last five lenses I have released, sir, have been FE mount. And so at some point I've got to release another DSLR lens too. At least I'd hope so. But I would not know what the market needs for that currently.
That's kind of the key thing when you look at it. That's really the key, because you look at where, it's like, where are we going to go next? That's an excellent question, but it's almost impossible to answer unless you look at a specific camera, let's say an R mount or a Z mount or something like that. In the Sony lineup, what's missing right now that's possible? And there are things like, we have one of the lenses that has a really good reputation in the DSLR line and sells well, and we do a lot of webinars and seminars and stuff about it, is the macro lens. Now we have in our lineup, we have the 20, the 30, 20, 24, and 35 f2.8 for the Sony E system that are 1:2 macro, but we don't have a 1:1 macro at this point in time. So is that a possibility? So I always look at it from the standpoint of if you look at, I think the Sony E mount is a perfect example of to kind of answer your question, because if you're thinking about in the new systems in R and Z, what's going to come first? What's going to be the thing? Well, look at the Sony, what they did in Sony. The first lens that they introduced was the 28 to 75 2.8. Why is that? Because even though Sony had 3 different lenses in the lineup that were similar focal length, because they had a 28 to 70 variable aperture, a 28 to 70 f4, and a 24 to 70 2.8. Those are already in the lineup by the time Tamron came out with the 2875. So it's like, why would you duplicate that focal length? Well, because one was variable aperture, one was fixed and it wasn't 2.8, and the other one was a great lens, but it's big, heavy, and very expensive. So come out with something that's small, lightweight, feels good, gives premium optical quality at a price point that people just go, wow, I got to have one of these. So that they've created demand in between what was already existing. So if you look at the Canon and Nikon systems, what should be the first things? Well, what everybody needs. It's like if everybody is looking for something in that same type of thing, like a 20-70 or some focal length that makes sense, that is, if it's at the right price point and it's smaller and lighter, then that's where it would go. The second lens that they introduced was a 17-28 2.8, because there was people that wanted to shoot video and there was a lot of demand. After the 2075 came out, what we were hearing in the field is, I need something wider and I need something longer.
Yep.
And so they came out with something wider. And then what happened after that? Well, we need some primes. That was the other demand we're going. So what do? They come out with 3 primes all at the same time, all the same size, weight, everything. What else did we need? We needed something long. So, and fast, 70-180 2.8. So it really, when you look at the way it progressed, it really made sense. It kind of fit into the mold of what Tamron's been doing for years. It's like, go where the demand is, go where the holes are. And so I think that what we'll see in the future is the same type of thing. The new introduction of the 28-200 was a very logical choice. We knew that at some point in time, there'd be an all-in-one zoom for the Sony E-mount system. Did we know exactly what focal length or anything? Well, 20-200 has been a good focal length, but the fact that they made it a 2.8, which hadn't been done before, was the breakthrough. And that's the selling point of that lens. It's small, it's lightweight, it's 2.8. The test shots that I've seen so far, Jared, you probably shot with it, have been phenomenal.
Stand up, yeah.
It's a beautiful piece. So I think if you look at what's missing, that's kind of the progression you might see. I've never seen Tamron make an introduction where it's 5 lenses at once. It's like, okay, we're going to do 5 new lenses. The most I've seen is that those 3 we came out with, the 20, the 24, and the 35. But that was because they're all built on basically the same chassis. It's just optically when you look at the size and weight of those, they're all really about exactly the same size and weight. So it's not like we'll see 5 new lenses in R mount or Z mount or whatever when they do it, but they might have a plan for a few different ones, and we'll hear about them one at a time. So,
and George, to his point, one of the things that I fully believe you should be able to expect in the future, and anyone shooting full frame mirrorless, is this, because we've already proven it with the FE lineup here, and that is, many of us who decided to take up mirrorless got into it for the reasons that it was marketed to us. It's small and it's lightweight. And then we got into that game and realized we might have needed some extra batteries, or no, I still need my f1.2 lens to go on the front of it that weighs 3.5 pounds, or I do want, a big long lens. And so we began to negate our small and lightweight. And I think that there's been a bit of a backlash in OEM people, because people are starting to realize, okay, I'm getting the image quality I want out of a smaller and lighter and maybe a more inexpensive piece that isn't Nikon or Canon branded or Sony branded. And so the expectation that going forward, we are going to stay true to this small and lightweight. That's why every FE is f2.8. It's to keep a size factor involved in it, so that way there's maybe more lenses in your bag, or less to carry hiking through the dells, whatever it may be.
And one of the things that keeps the price points down, because people always ask about, well, why is Tamron less expensive? Is it because it's not as good? Absolutely not. We have the best warranty. We back it up with the best service. We have all the things we talk about. But one of the things that keeps the price point down is the fact that we don't have 150 different lenses in our lineup. It's 15 to 20 or 25, at any given time, and some are phased out and some are replaced with other things as we go along. So you have to be able to sell enough lenses worldwide in order to pay for the research and development and be able to make a profit to stay in business. And so when they come out with a plan, they know where they need to be. When they come out with a plan for a lens, they know how many they need to sell in what time frame in order to make it work. That's one of the reasons Canon and Nikon lenses are more expensive. You know, if they make a 6mm fisheye that costs them millions of dollars to develop, whatever that research and development cost is has to be amortized across the entire line. Otherwise, they would never make it. So you pay for everything in the lineup. With Tamron, it's more about getting the best value for the dollar.
Thanks for the question, George. Is anybody else have any questions? Anything we can not answer? Clear as mud?
Steve, you brought up image stabilization.
Yep.
Now that even Canon is going to in-body image stabilization, what are your thoughts about the impact of that going forward in terms of the need to have IS?
That's a good question.
Vibration in the lens.
It's obviously, as stabilization has gotten better, the need for stabilization in the lenses has dwindled. You know, it hasn't been eliminated, but look at the Sony. If you look at our Sony FE lineup, none of them are stabilized. So one of the ways we're able to keep the size and weight down of those lenses is the fact that Sony's system has such a great stabilization system in it. And the thing works so well because it's designed as a native lens, there was no need to do that. So we came in with, again, much smaller and lighter and less expensive lenses. So if the other systems support it, maybe that's what we'll see. You know, that's speculation, but maybe to answer your question, maybe that's what will happen. All right.
Anyone else? I like how you get to answer all the questions, Steve. If I could do webinars like this all the time, it would be a lot easier.
No problem. You come up with titles and we'll just, you know, you log in and I'll just take over.
Of course, no, that's good. And I couldn't have asked for somebody better to work with the first time because you have a very deep knowledge of our product. And so thank you for,
well, I love going back and seeing some of those images and stuff because I'm going like when you saw, here's something that has nothing to do with this, but we're in a small circle of friends here. But you saw the picture there with Mr. Tamura and Mr. Arai, okay? What nobody here knows that I know is the fact that we were talking about the 28 to 200. This is a little, I'm telling you up front, I'm bragging a little bit, okay? But that's okay. But thinking back on the history of the company, Mr. Arai used to come to like PMA and the different shows, and he'd show up at the booth, and he was old back then when that was going on. But when the 28 to 200 came out, it was the small, they called it the small miracle. And there were shirts that were made up. I still have some of those old shirts. But I was sub-repping, so I wasn't the master rep. I was actually an independent rep that was sub-repping with another guy. And my territory was very small. I didn't call on the camera company. I didn't call on, you know, Arts in Milwaukee or anybody in Chicago. I didn't call on Madison, Chicago, Milwaukee. I had all the smallest camera stores in Wisconsin. That was my territory. And I went out and I did the best, and I was new and I had this new lens and I thought, this is a great thing everybody needs to know about, and traveled the territory and showed it to everybody and sold as much as I could. And I got to this PMA show and Mr. Arai was there. And we had a morning meeting, and Mr. Arai made a presentation to me for winning an award for making a small miracle with a small miracle, because they knew I had this small territory, and I sold that lens to every single dealer in my territory. But that was personally presented to me by Mr. Arai, and that's why when you showed that picture, I'm going like, near and dear to my heart.
Nice, nice. That's
so,
good to know.
You know, there is a lot of history there, and I did see, and you mentioned the 90s, and there was, when you don't see a lot of history there, it's that transition of going from manual focus to autofocus. And there were a lot of struggles of making that all happen. You know, you're going from a manual focus system, an Adaptall system or whatever, and all of a sudden you have these autofocus mechanisms. And we had a 35 to 90 that was, you know, designed as a kit lens that, you know, did okay, but obviously there needed a lot of improvements and everything. That was why the need for these technologies improved. But that's why we saw some of that lag. You know, everybody was buying point and shoot cameras, and, you know, the demand for SLRs was dwindling, and this change over to autofocus and not knowing. It's just like the changeover from film to digital. A lot of people were like, well, I don't know about this. Digital will never be as good as film, you know, and all these types of things. And autofocus is something that, you know, was only from the minds of Minolta.
I actually have a question for you, Randall. Can you, because when Steve was saying something about, you know, the triangulation of IS, do you know what Canon EOS, what the EOS stands for? There are two answers.
Because I looked it up yesterday and I saw the official answer, and it wasn't electronic optical system. It was it?
Yeah, it's an electronic optical system. That's one of the answers.
Yes, I do know the answer.
So the other answer is EOS was the god of dawn, because in Canon's world it was the dawn of a new era in photography. And that's how that came to be. And it's funny you asked, you're the Canon guy. I did a little time in service of Canon for a few years. So that's how I know some of the Canon things.
It's also ego outsized.
I like it.
I can understand that. I mean, it also made me think when we were talking about some things earlier, if you were to go to Canon headquarters, and they have a little museum in the front that most people can walk into, I believe. But one of the things they'll show you is, and I thought about this with Olympus too, you know, even though Olympus is getting out of the camera business, they're a world leader in endoscopy, if memory serves, or they're microscopes, and somebody else is endoscopy. Yeah. So we're still going to see them. We don't know them. In that little Canon museum, they put a T7 Rebel into a set of optical lenses that check macular degeneration and all that fun stuff in your eyeballs. It's actually a Canon Rebel that is saving your eyesight potentially when you go to your ophthalmologist to get your eyes tested. And you may not be aware of that. It could be another camera manufacturer in there too.
Well, we had a lot of people for many years that used to, if they found out, used to curse Tamron. Damn you and your lenses, you know, because we were making lenses for the surveillance cameras, the traffic light cameras. We're making lenses for those. And it's like, it was so clear I was able to not only see your license plate number, but see the smile on your face as you ran the red light.
I didn't know that. See, now I found a downside to my business. I didn't know that. Right on.
You have it only one way. So,
well, if nobody else has any questions, I think we're close to time. And on behalf of Steve, myself, the camera company, thank you so much for joining us today. This intimate little moment we've had. If you can get down to the store and test out some of the lenses, please do. If the store is open yet, or as soon as they can. If you got any questions, you can always reach out to Steve or I, or our website, our social feeds. We are reopening. Finally, we're in phase 2 in Long Island at the corporate headquarters. And so we are beginning to catch up on some repairs and some of those things. So we're getting back in order as well. So if you need us, don't hesitate to reach out.
We just can't travel yet. So we're waiting for that to happen.
Yes.
Then when we do that, we'll get Jared back out on the road and have him so you can beat him up face to face.
I'll take it.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.